Look at verse 14, the fifth paragraph. And for those of you keeping track, chapter 1 has 3 paragraphs in it. Chapter 2 has 2 paragraphs in it. The first paragraph was, maturing faith doesn't allow prejudice. That's the first 13 verses. The second paragraph, and the fifth one of the book, is a maturing walk of faith will always display itself in godly works. And that starts in verse 14. And in 2:14 he says this, "What use is it, my brethren, if a man says, I have faith, but he doesn't have any works? Can that faith save him?" And it's interesting. We were standing, Royce and Jim and I and John Glass, we were standing right at Calvin's Institute in Geneva. And that's John Calvin, who taught the Reformation doctrine in Geneva, built this great big library and teaching hall to train hundreds and hundreds of pastors and sent them out to pastor Reformation churches. That meant non-Roman Catholic works, sacramental system, but rather the gospel of Jesus Christ churches. And so at this spot, we were standing there, and John was giving the tour. And as we were standing there, this little Japanese fellow just kept, can you tell when someone's listening? They just keep kind of getting closer and closer, like this. And so John just said, "Hey, why don't you come to our tour? Do you speak English?" He said, "Yes." So we started letting him come on our little tour of Geneva. And he started asking questions, and all of a sudden he had 4 people witnessing to him. He didn't know what he'd gotten into. He'd gotten into, right in the middle of us, and we were all sharing. And he was totally given the liberal line that everybody's going to heaven, God's so good and so loving and all this. And I remember specifically saying to him, but it says right here in James chapter 2, that verse 19, if you believe in God, you do well. The demons believe and shudder. And I says, you just have demon faith. You don't believe any more about God than Satan does. Well, he didn't appreciate that very much. But he said, James isn't part of the Bible. Luther didn't like it, and it's not part of the Bible. I thought, that's what you do when a verse hits you. You say it's no good, and you just discard it. And that's what people have done throughout the years, because James is so specific. And what he says is this: a maturing saint is one that understands that true faith will have godly works backing it up. And what James gives here is how to detect the vital signs of living faith and what the proof of faith is. And we'll look at that. Look at chapter 3 as we hasten on. A maturing walk of faith will bridle the tongue, and the tongue is so important he spends 12 verses talking about it. And what he says in these verses is maturing saints will always ask, is your body in check? Your body's in check if your tongue is in check. How to perfect our speaking. He talks about how to have perfect speech. He talks about the power of our tongue. It can either burn people up or it can edify and build them up. And a maturing saint will know how to muzzle their mouth. They won't always be saying, have you heard? Would you pray with me about so-and-so's problems? And they just can't wait to share them. And a maturing saint muzzles their mouth and muzzles also their ears to not hear all that. Chapter 3, starting verse 13, a maturing walk of faith we're going to see in the days ahead. And James taught on that morning as the people crowded in expectantly. Starting in verse 13, he read to them that a maturing walk of faith will be demonstrating heavenly wisdom. I mean, a person that is walking with Jesus Christ has not of this world kind of wisdom. I mean, you just kind of go, wow, where did that come from? It's not from here. And what he does is he talks about what heavenly wisdom looks like. He says that maturing saints have signs of heavenly wisdom in their life. And those who are not maturing saints have signs of devilish influence in their life. You say, where's that? Well, look at 3:14. If you have bitter jealousy, you know what bitter jealousy is? It's when not only do you want what someone else has, but you don't want them to have it. That's the ultimate malignant form of jealousy. That's the kind of thing that someone will go in and ruin someone's life because they don't like how nice their life is. That's the cancerous kind of jealousy. And he says if you have jealousy like that, or selfish ambition in your heart, and you just selfishly want to advance yourself and you're over-ambitious for your own agenda, don't be arrogant and lie against the truth. That wisdom is not that which comes down from God. It's earthly, natural, and demonic. He says, watch out that your And I have to tell you, a lot of these motivation tapes and a lot of these motivation seminars that people go to, especially, I don't know if you've noticed, but you get into some of these sales deals and the first thing they start doing is trying to bait you on this idea that you've got to have this goal. You've got to post up this picture of a car or of a vacation home or of your retirement castle you're going to live in someday. And all of a sudden you start having this personal, consuming, selfish ambition to get that goal at the expense of everyone that gets in your way. And you start looking at people as tools that you use to get to your goal. And he says, if you think that's from God, you're totally wrong. Because where that kind of jealousy, verse 16, and selfish ambition exists, there is disorder and every evil thing. There is taking advantage of people. There is this whole idea of prejudice that he talked about in chapter 2, where you start classifying people, whether they're worthwhile to you because they have money, and you start separating and not treating people the way God does. He says, watch out. That kind of wisdom is not from me. That kind of wisdom is demonic and devilish. And then he gives in verse 17, and I'm sure the people love listening to this that day, and we're going to enjoy it. He says that maturing saints have the elements of wise living that he lists right here in their life. Maturing saints are pure in their lifestyle. They're peaceable, verse 17. They're gentle. They are reasonable. They are full of mercy. They have good fruit, the fruit of the Spirit coming out of their life. They're unwavering. They don't change every day, and they're up and down and all over the place. They're unwavering in their commitment to God, and they don't have hypocrisy. They don't act one way to you and a different way to someone else. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. What a beautiful picture. These people, everywhere they're going, they're throwing out seeds of righteousness. And I mean, people that are around them are surrounded by peace and righteousness. That's the characteristic of this heavenly wisdom.